Hello everyone, welcome back to Procaffeinate with Books. Today I have for you a pile full stack of books that I'll be sharing with you all. These books are all the ones that I've read in the month of June, and I'll be starting off with my least favorite ones and ranging towards the end of my video would be the ones that I absolutely loved and devoured this month. So stay tuned for it and let's jump in. First book that I have to share with you is Happy Place by Emily Henry, which did not make me happy at all. The only reason I actually picked this book up was because last year I loved Book Lovers and I absolutely loved that book, so I wanted to give this a try. Sadly, this did not really work out for me. It was too much of a romance plot revolving in there with no underlying, overlying, or any kind of side story that will, just get me through the book. There was nothing much to look forward to apart from the two people who were there in the story, and they were just relying too much on their past events, reliving those things. And in the present, the story wasn't really moving ahead, which kind of felt a little boring to me. Plus, the romance, and there were a lot of other issues that I had with this book, so I did not like it. Another book that I was a little disappointed by reading was The Horror of Haglin House, and the horror in the title is just metaphorical, so there were no actual horror vibes, just the metaphorical ones, or the horrors of human beings and their acts, is what this book wanted to display by the title. The story here was pretty interesting, especially from the plot perspective, because it's based around a protagonist who is actually a writer, lives a peaceful life in a small town, and she actually talks to two of her book characters too, which is a little peculiar, but yeah, it's good to read something different too. But then one of her common friend actually reaches out to her that someone else is house arrested in their own house, and they have been kept like prisoners, and there is something to it, and she really wanted her to help to find out what's the situation is. Meanwhile, on the other side, there are a lot of women who are dying randomly at different places in the town, and she feels that these two incidents might somehow be correlated for some significant matter or the other. While the plotline was really good, I was having a little difficulty with the writing style of the book, where I wanted to understand who's speaking what lines, and it was becoming a little difficult, especially distinguishing between the voices and the lines of the two characters who are imaginary and the author is the main lead in this case. So that was a bit turn off for me. Moving ahead to the next section of our average or decent one-time reads, I have The Braid Girls, which is a middle grade book, and I did enjoy this one for the most share of the part. The story here is about three girls who are trying to discover their true personalities during a summer vacation and wanted to have the best time of their lives during this time. And they are facing certain ups and downs, how to grow their own business, how to face the challenges, how to face the bullies, and how to coexist with the loss of a parent. After reading the book, I do feel that more of the middle graders would be enjoying the story, but for me as an adult, I think I would have appreciated the story a bit more if I had a little more background about the lives of these all three characters, what they are coming from, and why they are behaving the way they are. Example, one of them is quite controlling and wants to be in charge of a life and take all the decisions and everything. Why they are the way they are. I think a little more glimpse into the story would have worked a bit more for me. The next book that I read was The Savage Beast, and might I tell you, this was supposed to be my five-star book for this month, but sadly, it did not work out as planned because of the story, pacing, and a lot more other things. Let me give you a brief blurb first. The story here is following a female protagonist from India during the British times when they were actually colonizing India. So, that was something that is very close to my heart. And whenever a story has been picked up on the place of your origin, you really associate a lot with it. So that is one of the reasons that I was really looking forward to the story in this particular one. Our protagonist here is the daughter of one of the Nawabs in Calcutta, and from there she flees with her lover and explores different areas. Some of the names are mythical, but you will be able to geographically locate them based on the descriptions that the book gives you. So that is done pretty well, and she routes to her new life, and she has to face a lot of challenges, obviously, and also make a lot of adjustments from a princess life to a standard normal human being life, and she's coping up with that while she's also getting accustomed to a lot of other things, and she's basically understanding the person with whom she fell in love with, and she did so many things for him, is not really that appreciative of those efforts. And now she's going ahead into the story to an unknown land, going to be staying with unknown people, and what's really going to happen to her. Okay, now let me quickly tell you what I actually loved about this book. The story is very compelling. It's a page turner kind of a thing, but with a mixed pacing. But for an Indian like me, I'm sure you will really find it very hard to put it down. The second portion is that it also involves a lot of mixed emotions, and it was able to cultivate them into me. For some portions of the book, I was really angry on the main protagonist and her decisions that she was making, and all those things that the Britishers were saying. It was fuming anger inside me just by reading that book. So that was done very well. There were a lot of sad moments as well. Third part was the ending. That was one of my favorite parts about the book. I wish the whole book was like that. In that case, I would have given it 5 out of 5 stars for sure. Now moving ahead to some problematic areas. First, I felt that the protagonist was not taking a lot of decisions on time. It was like a delayed effect, as if her brain was working really slowly and she couldn't make up her mind to take certain decisions. Second, the book shows that you are basically suffering because of your loved ones a lot, and you are doing absolutely nothing to change those situations for a very, very, very long time. It's like you are stretching that rubber band to its maximum core capacity, and when it breaks and it hurts you, then you are actually making certain decisions. My most major issue with this book was that it proclaimed on the cover and even the blurb that it's a Greek mythology retelling of certain significance from the Medea story, and I did not find resemblance at first, but when I went back and searched the Medea story and how it's actually trying to resemble that, that was like a very minuscule amount of resemblance. So I don't really feel it's right to actually, sell this book or even forecast it by saying hashtag Greek mythology story of Medea and something. That level of resemblance you can find in any woman's life story, absolutely. तो ग्रीक mythology story तो ये कहीं से भी नहीं था. Please, nobody can convince me for that title. It's not supposed to be there. They might as well remove it. Next book, Tumbling Girl, was another victim of the wrong genre classification category part. And while the story was around the female protagonist who is really good at detective work, but there are other detectives working into the whole murder mystery part of the story where, basically a lot of bodies are piling up around a studio and people are just wondering what's really happening in there. She steps her foot in and wants to investigate because the recent person who died was really close to her, and she wants to do basically everything to get to the core of it. Now, while I do agree that the timelines of the book are Victorian London, so you can classify them historical fiction, but apart from the descriptions of scenic beauty and the major landscape areas that are there in that location, nothing else was really projecting historical times. For specific areas, the dialogues that the people were speaking were written in a pretty modern tongue, which I felt did not fit the historical genre category. It might as well be just simply tagged as detective mystery story, and it would have set the right expectation for the audience. The Walled Garden is another historical fiction book which basically revolves around people and their lives in Old England, and it's depicting how weathering the two wars back to back has actually changed their life and scarred each one of them in different ways. Not just the people who actually went ahead and fought the battle, but also the people who stayed behind and weathered the storm. So it actually carries you into a small town and then takes you through the life and experiences of war and how it has transitioned them to another different being altogether, changing their priorities and their outlook towards life. The writing style, even the character developments of all the people living in there, having their different traits altogether, was done very well into the book. My only complaint here was from the plot story. Now, because we were focusing on different people's life at every angle during the war and after the war, what happened back then, etc., etc., I did not figure out any single or dual protagonists into the story, and the story was just weaving through house by house of people and just intertwining them in between and giving you a common narrative of the town, which is why it wasn't much impressionable to me. Our next book is a women's fiction history mystery kind of a vibe. Now, here the story is about the housekeepers who are planning a giant heist on the upcoming ball event that the house owner is actually planning. And behind this whole heist is a person who has a big grievance with the house owners because of certain things that they did to her loved ones in the past. And now, to take the revenge, she has plotted the whole scheme to heist the whole house and take everything in it with them. Though I do feel a lot of instances in the book are displayed as too easygoing, and in reality, it wouldn't be so easy to implement them. But considering this is a very light women's fiction mystery kind of a book, I think it would do wonderful as a book club read because there are a lot of aspects that you can discuss. There are a lot of questions that you can, pop up among yourself. I think this would be a very fun read, especially for monthly book club picks. My next book was a manga read, Coral Reef. This is a story about a young girl living in her sweet little teenage life, and her whole life is basically unraveled when a young boy comes into the picture, and then their lives intertwine together from college to sea surfing and much other things. Now, this book was decently interesting. It was more of a find some one time read for me. There wasn't much to judge the book on basis to the writing style, but the characters, the plethora kind of characters in this book was really interesting. Plus, the illustrations of the book were really beautiful, which made it a very fun and magical kind of a read for me. My next read was a 3.5 star kind of a book for me. There were some problematic areas, but mostly it was good. I read this book in a combination of ebook plus audiobook, so I have different opinions on both the formats, and I did wanted to share them with you first. I wasn't really enjoying some portions of the audiobook, especially one of the male narrators. His voice was not doing the best for my reading experience, so I basically swapped off the audiobook and strictly went ahead with my ebook after 40% of the book, and from there onwards I really liked the book. The story here is around the life of indigenous people who are still living on Sugar Island, and the atrocities people from different educational institutions actually commit just to get their hands on their ancestral properties and remains of their ancestors. The story here is about a middle grade child who is basically doing an internship at one of these institutes, and there she's brought face to face with the reality of how difficult and complex the whole process of gaining back your ancestral things from museum archives is. Top of this, the rising number of young girls disappearing, especially the indigenous one from the streets, is an alarming thought and situation to have in your neighborhood. And so, our young protagonist had decided to put a plan into action and retrieve all the ancestral properties as well as these young girls. Next book was actually a non-fiction pick for me. Now, from the pictures, it does look like a children's book, but yeah, it is a children's book, but in a non-fiction category where basically the book educates you about the life and habitats of red panda, how they actually came into being, and where are their habitats primarily located, what kind of activities do they do, where do they stay, what kind of food they have, and their behavioral properties and interaction with the nature. So, if you're actually looking for some educational related fun activity material for your young ones, I think this could be an interesting pick because it also has certain activities mentioned towards the end of certain chapters that makes it more interactive for the children. Welcoming you to the good some reads portion of this video. I first have The House of Doors, which was my LGBT trope read for the month as well, because obviously it's Pride Month, and this is set up in historical fiction timelines, specifically around 1920s, and the story is doing a time hop from European estates to Pangan Island in Malaysia and some portions in China as well. This is basically catering to two different story tracks. One is the life of an author who is subduing his true identity from his fans and everybody in his life except the very closed ones who actually know his true identity. Second is around the story of a young woman who is charged for a murder in these foreign lands. Now, some think that she has actually committed the murder, while the others think that she has been forced to commit a murder or been forced to foreplay as if she has committed the murder while someone else gets to live freely. So there is a conspiracy mystery in these foreign lands, people living around. Inspired by true story, this book has actually given the original story a new, fresh angle by the author's perspective, and it also discusses a lot of social strains that men and women both are put under the thumb of the empire and how they are supposed to, live their lives, how they are supposed to behave in a certain manner. The next book, Rooster House, is actually a memoir considering the story of a young woman who had to uproot her life from her home country because of the Ukrainian wars and go settle in an American country altogether. And when she comes back to check upon the things that are there in here, everything seems to be too different. And she has a feeling that she has been away for far too long and things have changed a lot, but not the ones that should have changed. And now she's being treated like a foreigner in her own home country. And all those needle pricking moments are discussed at length from the very basic stuff of how you actually behave and forget to behave in your own home country. Highly audience specific. I would recommend this to people who actually want to read around the lives of actual people and what happened to them after the Ukrainian wars and even during the wars, how their lives were impacted. If those are the tropes that you're looking to read, this might be the one for you. This is a book about books and discovery that is lost to time, with three different strangers revolving in different timelines trying to find a simple bookshop that keeps vanishing into thin air. I think that's all I personally need to get invested into the book. So I did, and I absolutely enjoyed it, especially the time hopping part in different timelines. It was done so methodologically that I wasn't confused at all. The characters that three different females who are portraying the leads in their own timelines, and all of them are being suppressed by some or the other male person in their life, be it their husband, brother, friend, supposed to be friends, or someone or the other, and they keep ditching them for some XYZ reasons altogether. But their own zeal to live their life at their own terms, it's what keeps them going, and that's what contributes to the historical story. My favorite part was that it also cross references a lot of classic literatures regarding the Bronte sisters and their work, which added to another layer of creaminess to the story. And I couldn't imagine a better ending to this book. This beautiful book is about some uncanny people living together at Sunset Hall for all their sunset years together instead of certain old age homes. And this is a beautiful narrative tale of these old birdies living their life, facing all those challenges, and still being so upbeat about life and things that they really want to do and how they want to go ahead with it, even though these might just be their final days. Following the plot of someone getting murdered nearby and the main murder weapon being stored in their house, they suspect someone is trying to uncannily frame them for things they have not done and take their revenge. Now, these old birdies are up to the task of finding this murderous person and why they want to frame them. Next book, Virginia Creeper, is a horror mystery book that is set up around Christmas timelines where the protagonist is actually touring the city and having a fun little vacation while she and her friends feel that they are being followed by not something living. Obviously, someone dead is trying to follow them and they just want to know what he wants with them. And so they decide to do a seance, just another day in their lives. And that's where they start talking to ghosts, and the whole chain of events starts where they tumble upon not one, not two, not 10, not 20, plus 30 plus of ghosts living in that particular town, and they are all looking to find peace and they just want to help their case and basically help them find the path towards the peace, and that's what they basically do. The book is a little cozy, a little creepy, a little spooky, and all of those combinations that I just mentioned, and I think it's perfect for spooky season or even Christmas vacations if cozy, but horror is something that you can manage. Tales of the Forgotten Founders is the third book in the Fallenheim Chronicles trilogy. It is a middle grade series, and this has been one of my most anticipated books for this year. Now, while I was actually eagerly waiting for this book, I knew slightly what this book would be having. It was supposed to have an aftermath of the story when Zed and Tuesday basically defeated the dictator in that dimension, not exactly world, but yeah, let's call it dimension. And the aftermath was supposed to be discussed, but what I did not know that their mother would be a secret princess, and while she is a secret princess, they obviously have to stay at the palace, and while they're staying at the palace, living their grand life that supposedly looks so lustrous on the outside, they have their own teeny tiny bitsy challenges that they're facing. And while one of them were getting educated in certain tours across the hallways, they stumble upon some secret passageways behind the paintings. And from there, they also stumble upon a secret room which is filled with things that were supposed to be at Earth. Now, one thing is certainly clear: as much as fuss their parents made to go to and fro from this dimension to Earth, it's not clearly that difficult because someone else has been doing all the time and been collecting these things under these roof. So now they are upon to solve this mystery of who that person is and how they basically get through. Godkiller comes up with a new fantasy world build-up where people are more stronger than gods now because after the last wars that have happened, gods are almost diminished. And now this new king who has come into the power has commissioned a lot of god killers who are basically supposed to go ahead and kill any and every kind of gods they foresee with. I do feel that the combination of audiobook plus ebook works fine enough for you, or even a physical book for that matter. If not ebook, you can do the complementary part because the initial pace is a little slow. The audiobook will help you build up that pace and keep you engaged. Whereas there are certain portion because the writing is a little tricky, you might want to go back and cross reference, and for that reason I feel a physical copy is a must in hand where you can basically annotate a lot of those things and areas that are being spoken to, because it is a very wide world that has been built up and you might just end up confusing yourself that where did this happen, where are they headed to, and all those places. Overall, I just feel that you need to read this book with a little patience at hand, and it will surely reward you towards the end because everything in this book is really good, just the pacing is a little off. I'm so glad that I actually started with the Broken Earth trilogy. This is the first book in that trilogy, and it's a extensive, complex world build-up that you will be experiencing. So keep your patience handy yet again. But obviously, the book is very great. The whole plot revolves around certain people who are differently capable of harnessing Earth's energy and controlling things and rhythm of Earth with it. No doubt this whole book was great, but it ended very abruptly, and just from there it jumped into the next book, and it was like very abrupt, not even a closure to a particular scene. It just ended mid sentence. That's how abrupt the ending was in this case. So I do feel that a whole series review in this case would be more justified. So I really don't have much to contribute from review perspective, but from story and plot and world building perspective, I think this is great. Emo Reality was one of my most difficult reads for this month, but also the best ones, like to a superlative degree kind of best. This is actually a non-fiction memoir book of a girl who was dealing with personality disorder and how she came by across identifying herself as a disorder person and what she did for the treatment. But even before all that things happen, the whole journey of what kind of reactions was she giving as a teenager when she was suffering from this, and how her suffering also translated into her family's suffering is all discussed at great length. It is surely a very difficult one for reading, and you might have to take a lot of pauses. I personally had to take a lot of pauses, but because this is something I'm very much interested in reading it, I did cope up well with it. So I would say this to my readers that you should pick this up if this suits your genre and preference of reading, but please keep in mind the disclaimers that are mentioned for this book. There's a lot of trauma that's been discussed, a certain level of verbal abuse, and a lot of mental disorder related things that happen in one's life. So, plus keep those disclaimers in mind before you actually start anything, and you will be well prepared for these things. And that, my friends, were all the books that I read this month. And you know what June taught me? One, appearances are deceptive. Not just don't judge a book by its cover, but also don't judge a book by its title. You should be aware about that. Plus, a lot of wrong categorization has led to certain level of disappointments for me. Had they been categorized properly, or the blurbs were a bit more effective, not putting you into a mindset of that this might be, for example, the Greek mythology example, I think those books would be better appreciated by me. But because certain wrong set of expectations were set in, I think it did disturb the overall reading experience for me. But thanks to the last two rows of books that I actually read, my reading experience for the whole month was a bit elevated, I would say, and it was still good. So I think we did a fair job for June, and I really wanted to thank you all for watching this far into the video. If you have made so far, please drop me a books emoji into the comment down below, and I'll catch up with you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBR strong. Goodbye.